Welcome back to another episode of the Life's Playbook podcast. This is episode 8, I believe. Episode 8, season 2 of the show. We've got some somewhat groundbreaking news, depending on how you want to put it, in the NFL world, as well as some fun little hidden story in the NBA that I think has been kind of swept under the rug. But I thought it was an interesting conversation, and I'm going to give my personal take on this conversation. It's just me today. I don't know where my co-host is. He has not responded to the messages that I sent. But if he does, hit me up. He should be joining the show whenever he's available. But right now it is just me. So you guys are stuck with me today. And we're going to talk a little bit about the somewhat groundbreaking NFL trade news, in case you have forgotten about it. And we're going to talk about the interesting, controversial conversation in the NBA world today. So, that is on today's agenda. So, let's get into today's action. I'm your host, Quinn Jackson. Again, it is just me for right now, till my co-host hits me up why he is late to the show. But he is in the military nonetheless, so he's got to deal with military things. So I can understand if that is the reason why he's late. But that is a conversation him and I will have to have. So, with that being said, let's get into Season 2, Episode 8 of the Life's Playbook podcast. I encourage you to like and subscribe after this video. It's greatly appreciated, and the channel has been seeing exponential growth. So, I want to thank all of you guys. So, with that being said, let's get into today's episode. And as always, the game never ends here at the Life's Playbook podcast. Let's get into it. Let's talk about the groundbreaking NFL trade news. Again, depending on how you want to put it, whether this is groundbreaking news or not. But last night, the Commanders finalized a deal with the 49ers to trade Deebo Samuels. That's right, the same Deebo Samuels that was killing it just a few years ago. He is now out. He's been verbal about wanting out of San Fran for a while now. The Niners are done putting up with his weight gain, his attitude, and they finalized a trade with the Commanders to ship him off to some former friends of his, former teammates of his in college. So that's where he's headed. I believe the Commanders traded for him, and they only gave up a fifth-round pick. So in hindsight, this is a steal for the Commanders. This is an absolute steal. This can work out for the Commanders, or it could not work out for the Commanders. This could be a groundbreaking thing for the Commanders, or it could not be a groundbreaking thing for the Commanders. Again, Deebo hasn't looked great as of late. His seasons past have been rigged with injury, so he hasn't been the same, and I understand that was part of the concern for the 49ers and part of the thought process into trading him to the Commanders. But I do think, again, that this trade could work out for the Commanders if they get him motivated, if they get him down to the weight he's supposed to be at, and if he can reproduce the production that we are used to seeing him when he is fully healthy, ready to go. I still think he's a phenomenal player. I don't think he's washed. I just think he needs a little bit of motivation and a little bit of a fresh start. And the Commanders are a fresh start. He's been in San Fran pretty much his entire career. They've been to the NFC Conference Championship multiple times. They've been to the Super Bowl multiple times this past decade, so they've had success, but it's clear to see that this man wanted a change. He wanted a fresh start. He wanted a fresh look, and again, his conditioning and his attitude weren't the best either, and the 49ers knew it, and he knew it, that it was time to turn a new leaf. That's exactly what they did. So, Deebo Samuels is now going to be a Washington Commander. Again, this could be a good trade for the Commanders if they're able to get him back to the prime that we know he has. Or this could be a bad trade for the Commanders if he continues to stay the same way he is. But I don't think he will. He's going to be around former friends, former colleagues. He's going to have, a nice young rookie quarterback that just came off the best rookie season of all time. And I think the team, sky's the limit for the Commanders. I think this is a solid trade. I'd give this trade a nice solid B+. I don't think it's a solid A trade, mainly because, again, it's a coin flip. You could get new prime Deebo again, or you could still get the same Deebo that's injury prone, is always complaining about something, and he's quote unquote washed. So I'm giving this a B plus trade, mainly because of that. But solid trade nonetheless for the Commanders. Great pickup. He's going to be plugged into the wide receiver room, which is great because the Commanders also needed another proven wide receiver over there, and he can do that again with meeting the right conditions and whatnot, and getting him back to his prime self. He can do that. He can definitely help the Commanders' offense. So, good trade. Great trade, in my opinion, for the Commanders. For the Niners, I mean, honestly, that was a steal. Getting a fifth round pick for him, that's kind of, I wouldn't say disrespectful, but it's definitely, man, not something that you would expect to get in return for somebody like Deebo. Again, obviously I can't stress enough that there are speculations that the dude is washed. I don't think he's washed. I still think he just needs a little bit of a fresh start. And I think he's going to get that fresh start. But only getting a fifth rounder for him, I don't know. That's not something you would expect to get for somebody like Deebo. But hopefully they make the best of that fifth round pick, which I think they will. The Niners are a good organization nonetheless. With that being said, there are also trade talk that Ayuk is heading up on the trade block as well. So Brandon Ayuk, he was the star receiver. He was technically the proven wide receiver one over there. He was paid a multi-million-dollar contract. I believe it was $120 million to be exact on an extension. He also hasn't looked great. He also has been injury-ridden, and he's also been verbal about how he feels about continuing to stay in San Fran. So he's also coming up on the trade block as well. There are talks that the Niners are also looking into getting rid of him as well. Be on the lookout. I will be on the lookout, and I hope you are on the lookout as well for where Ayuk goes. Ayuk, same thing with Deebo. I think he is still a phenomenal player. I think he is still a $120 million player, but I do think he also needs to back his game up because there's no way you get paid $120 million just to not play. Now, I understand he got injured this season. So he couldn't show off his talent. But his play as of recent hasn't been up to 120 mil. It certainly has not been, and I think 49ers fans know it the best, that his play has not been up to par, worth $120 million contract. So be on the lookout for where Brandon Ayuk lands. I will be on the lookout as well for where Brandon Ayuk lands. He's a good receiver. Again, I still think he is also phenomenal. I think he also needs a new leaf as well. So wherever he goes, I think will be a nice, fresh, young start for this guy. Again, he still provides a lot. I know both him and Deebo have been injury prone, and they have developed a disgust for the Niners as of recent, and statistically they have fallen off, if you may. They have fallen off. But I think, again, with fresh new start, both these guys can be back to the primes that we know they have and that we know that they have left. So be on the lookout for where Brandon Ayuk is going to end up. Is rumored to be next up on the trade block for the 49ers. So with that being said, that's the groundbreaking NFL news. Solid trade for the Commanders. The sky's the limits for them. They're only going to get better and better and better. And I think Deebo is going to resonate well over there, being with some of his former colleagues. So let's talk about some NBA action today. Let's talk about this conversation that I think has kind of flown under the radar a little bit, but it definitely needs to be brought up, and I'm going to give my opinion on this conversation because I think it is an interesting and needed conversation to have about the NBA. No, this isn't about the playoffs. There will be an episode for the playoffs later on. There will be an episode for the playoffs, predicting the NBA playoffs, because there is only a month and a half left of basketball in the regular season. So stay tuned for that episode. But a couple days ago, LeBron James came out after, I believe, they won. I forgot the team they beat. He came out a couple days ago, and some reporters asked him about who he thinks, or they asked him specifically about Anthony Edwards and whether LeBron thinks he should be and he will be, and if he wants to be the next face of the NBA. And LeBron, I'm paraphrasing obviously, but LeBron basically said, why would he want to be the face of the league when everybody is constantly trashing on the league on today's game? Again, paraphrasing, but that is what he said after, I believe, they won. Correct me if I'm wrong, Lakers fans, if you know the game that I'm referencing here. Correct me if I'm wrong. But he did come out and basically say, why would Anthony Edwards want to be the face of the league when, today's media, more specifically the NBA media and the people that cover the game, trash on him. Trash on him, trash on the players, and trash on today's modern NBA. And these same reporters have also come out and directly asked Anthony Edwards if he wants to be, and if he will be, or if he considers himself to be the face of the NBA, of today's game. Anthony Edwards also said pretty much the same thing. He's not going to be, he doesn't feel like he is. He doesn't want to be the face of the NBA, which is understandable. He just wants to play basketball. He just wants to hoop, which is what we all want to see. We all love to see him hoop. And he's been hooping very well. Anthony Edwards has been hooping very well as of late, but Anthony Edwards himself has verbally spoken and said that he would rather just be known as a player that goes out there, gives it his all, and hoops, which he does. I don't think he wants to deal with that whole being, considered the new face of the NBA. However, with that being said, with LeBron having said those things, and with Anthony Edwards having said those things, that's caused a little bit of a small controversial topic of discussion in the NBA world. Again, I think this conversation has kind of flown under the radar, with the NFL Combine going on, and this Deebo Samuels to the Commanders trade. I think that's kind of mirrored this. It's kind of masked this topic, this conversation. But that's why I'm bringing it up, because I think it's interesting. Stephen A. He's kind of the front runner. I would say Stephen A. Smith, is the face of the NBA media, the people that cover the NBA. The analysts, the reporters, all those guys, the people that come up with these narratives, these stories. I would say Stephen A. is not only the biggest, face of, NBA media, but he's kind of one of the biggest faces of sports media, to be specific. He's kind of one of the big faces for all these sports shows. And, I've watched Stephen A. I watch his podcast. Shout out to his podcast / show. I watch it. I think it's a great show. It inspires me a lot. But he pretty much came out, again, paraphrasing what he said about a day later on First Take. He basically came out and said that he thinks that what LeBron said is hypocritical. A player that's made billions off of the league, that's helped revolutionize the league, and has pretty much elevated the league to the standard that it's at now. He pretty much thinks that it's hypocritical for LeBron James to say something like that, to say that people are always trashing. Again, he didn't say trashing. He said the S word, but I'm not going to say that. But he said he thinks it's hypocritical of LeBron to, constantly complain about the NBA media, and he thinks it's hypocritical for a guy who's made generational wealth off of the NBA, who's helped do all these great things for the NBA. He thinks it's hypocritical for LeBron to say something like that. Especially considering when technically, at one point in time, LeBron was the face of the NBA. At one point in time. I think all NBA fans know the era, that the small window that I'm talking about, where LeBron was considered the face of the NBA. To an extent, real quickly talking about like candidates for being face of the NBA. You got Jokic, you got Tatum, Victor Wembanyama, so we're looking at, Anthony Edwards. So we're looking at young guys who are entering the prime of their careers, that have all already had some sort of accomplishments in their careers. Anthony Edwards obviously is the best candidate, because we as fans all love him. He's got that $1 million sponsorship contract with Nike, which is a big brand that also covers the NBA, that also works with the NBA. He's got that $1 million, Sprite sponsorship that he's also done. He's in all the Sprite commercials that you see out there in today's day and age. So as far as candidacy goes, it makes sense that Anthony Edwards would be considered the next face of the league. Obviously, again, Anthony Edwards verbally came out and said he'd rather just be considered a hooper and not the face of the league, which is all fine and dandy. But Stephen A. pretty much basically came out there, he gave his take. I watched this specific segment on YouTube where he was heated and fired up about it. He gave his take about it. But I am going to be one of those guys that sides with the players here because although LeBron, he is a guy of high standard, of high value. He has made generational wealth. LeBron he is right at times. We as the media, we do look at the NBA, today's game specifically, a lot differently as opposed to how we looked at the past and at other sports in general. We don't look at the NFL the same way that we look at the NBA. We don't look at NHL the same way that we look at the NBA. We don't look at MLB the same way. Like we don't compare today's NFL to the 90s and the 80s of the NFL. We don't do that. We don't compare today's MLB to the old MLB. And you get the theme that I'm going here. You get what I'm trying to say is that we don't compare nostalgia 24/7 with all those other sports to, the current sports, to the current NFL, to the current NHL, to the current MLB. We don't do that as often as we do with the NBA. And I got to side with LeBron. I'm actually going to side with the players here in general. I think that it is kind of unfair that, we as the media, we paint this picture, we paint this narrative, we constantly compare, LeBron and Jordan. And I get these are all fun debates. These are all fun debates to have, LeBron versus Jordan or Mahomes versus Brady. We love to compare, and it is inevitable. I will agree with Stephen A. Smith that comparisons will be inevitable no matter what sport you play. If you are an all-time great like LeBron is, you're going to get compared to guys like MJ and whatnot. And if you're a rising star like Anthony Edwards, you're going to get comparisons too to other OGs that played in the NBA. So I will agree on Stephen A. Smith that comparisons are inevitable. People will naturally compare the modern NFL to the modern NFL to the old NFL, or the modern MLB to the old MLB, or these NBA to today's NBA. It's going to happen. So I will agree with Stephen A. Smith there. However, outside of that, I'm siding with the players here. I do think it is unfair that we constantly throw them under the bus like that, and we say, well, he's not nearly as close as this guy from the 90s or the 80s, because this guy from the 80s and the 90s, he did something that this guy can never do. You know what I'm saying? I don't think today's rising stars in the NBA should be constantly held to a standard that, let's be honest, is anybody ever going to get 6 NBA rings ever again? Is anybody ever going to get, all these scoring titles that Jordan has ever again? Is anybody going to ever get past 40,000 points, career points, like LeBron? No. Some of these things that we throw out there, that we the media throw out there, and we love to use to downplay modern, and I keep saying NFL, NBA players. Some of these things are just unreachable. Now that doesn't mean just because this, let's say Anthony Edwards. Let's just say Anthony Edwards is never going to get 4 rings. Does that mean his career was a bust? Let's say he only gets 1 ring. Does that mean his career was a bust because he didn't meet the standard that LeBron set and that MJ set? No, that means he just didn't get 4 rings. He had a great career. 1 ring is good enough. I would be satisfied retiring with 1 ring. I mean, it's hard to win championships, and it's hard to get all these other individual accolades. It's hard to get all these MVPs, DPOYs, go after all these scoring titles, go after all these defensive titles, try to get up on the leaderboard for all-time career points, all-time career assists. It's hard to do that, and you have to have longevity to do that. So, so that's one of the point of emphasis is that I'd like to throw out there is that, we the media, we tend to throw a lot of things, we tend to throw a lot of objects out there that we hope these younger rising stars can get after. And some of these things that we throw at them, some of these things are just they're just not possible to get. They're once in a lifetime stats that just they'll never be broken. These records will never be broken. Like, I don't think anybody's ever going to get 41,000 career points ever. LeBron will probably be the only guy to do that. And if somebody one day magically does surpass LeBron on that, cool. But, I'm just saying, as a point of emphasis, that some of the things that we throw out there and we expect all these younger cats to try to compete and get, that they're some of them are just not reachable. They're just not reachable. And I think I do agree with LeBron and I do agree with Ant that I think it is kind of unfair that throw we constantly throw these things out there for these young guys to try to catch, and when they don't get them, or they come up short by the end of their career, we say, well, he didn't get this, but this guy had that. He didn't get, X amount of scoring titles, so he's not better than this guy. You know what I'm saying? He didn't get X amount of rings, so he's not better than that guy. I do think it is unfair to hold players to that standard when it's their career. Their career, how well their career is, should not be based off of how close they are to a guy that played in the NBA 40 years ago. I will say it again. We should not dictate how well a modern NBA player's career is based on how close they got to some guy that played 40 years ago. We shouldn't do that because it diminishes the game and it discredits the wonderful careers that we're already seeing in today's NBA. That's the first point of emphasis. Real quickly, I do want to bring up something that Stephen A. Smith said too about us, the media, more specifically those big news analysts and the reporters. I do understand because he brought up the fact that it's not just guys like him that have never played the game before that are up there yapping and talking trash about KD or talking trash about LeBron, talking trash about Ant. He did bring up a valid point that there are former players that have been in the league that join shows like First Take and whatnot, and there are Hall of Famers. Everybody on the inside the NBA, they're all Hall of Famers except for Bernie, but there are Hall of Fame players out there that also step into journalism. They step into being an analyst and they analyze the NBA and they do cover and they do kind of talk trash from time to time about today's game. Now, I'm just going to say real quickly before I move on to my second point of emphasis, I'm just going to say that while that's cool, there are guys and there are former players from all sports that do this. There are former players and Hall of Famers in all sports that do this after their sports career. They'll either go into coaching or they'll go into journalism or they'll do X, Y, Z after their career. And that's fine and dandy. But going back to the NBA specifically, while that's fine and all, when a Hall of Famer is talking trash about, and I'm not saying NBA Hall of Famers do this all the time, but I'm just saying when when a moment like that occurs, it doesn't look good on today's NBA. It doesn't look good on today's NBA when the higher ups, the legends, are constantly bashing the younger guys that are trying to be legends themselves. It doesn't look good on the game, and it diminishes. Again, it discredits the younger guys and it diminishes the younger guys. And maybe that could be a reason why the NBA is the way it is today. Who knows? But I'm just saying, while Stephen A. has a point that there are former players and there are Hall of Famers that have stepped into journalism, that is fair point. That is a fair point. But at the same time, when those guys are also doing the same thing, again, I'm not saying they do it all the time. I'm just saying that when there is a moment like that, it doesn't look good on today's NBA. It doesn't look good on the rising stars that are trying to make legends of themselves. Again, I'll go back to what I said a few minutes ago. We should not dictate this young cat's career based on how close he got to Michael Jordan's career. We shouldn't do that. So, moving on to my second point of emphasis. Again, nostalgia versus the modern era. I know we love to compare how the game was played in the 90s and the 80s and compare it to how the game was played in the 20s to now. We love to do that, and it is inevitable. But there comes a point where that's just toxicity at this point. It gets to a point where it's toxicity. It gets to a point where you start setting all these invisible boundaries that, the younger guys have to get through in order to be considered great. These guys, these guys are playing different styles of basketball. These guys are playing newer styles of basketball, sometimes fun styles of basketball. Now, I understand basketball as of recent years hasn't been great. The All-Star weekend has been a dumpster fire for the past couple of years now, and I understand that we have a lot of stars sitting out of games, a lot of stars becoming ineligible for winning awards, a lot of stars, I understand that the product itself hasn't been great as of recent, and there needs to be changes, and the ratings are dropping, and I understand all of that stuff. I understand all of that stuff. And this kind of leads into something else that I saw earlier today, where Stephen A. Smith was reacting to a comment that Draymond Green said about how the 2015 to 2019 was the golden era of basketball. Again, I'm paraphrasing, and Stephen A. Smith gave his opinion on that, and he basically said, "Are we forgetting about the 90s, and are we forgetting about the 80s? Are we forgetting about Larry Bird and what he did with the Celtics, and Magic Johnson and what he did with the Lakers?" And that's the type of toxicity that I'm talking about. For my second point of emphasis, that's the type of toxicity that I'm talking about. Now, again, I love Stephen A. I love watching him. He can be funny at times. Some of his takes can be outrageous sometimes, and some of his ideology can be questionable. But I think Stephen A. is wrong about this entire thing. But that's the type of toxicity that I'm talking about here. When you're constantly you're constantly bringing in nostalgia into something that really doesn't require talking about nostalgia at all. Draymond, and for all from in my opinion, I think Draymond is right. 2015 to 2019 was the golden age of basketball. It was the golden age of this era of basketball, because we had a lot of great NBA finals between those years. We had a prime peak NBA All-Star weekend. We had Curry in his prime, Durant in his prime, Clay in his prime, Draymond in his prime. We had all of these guys in their prime. Westbrook in his prime, Harden in his prime. We had all these amazing conference finals, all these amazing playoffs within that era, all these amazing finals come out of that era. And to sit up there and basically say, well, all those things are great, but they're not to the level of what Bird did in the 80s, or what Magic did in the 80s. Those things, or what MJ did, Isaiah Thomas did. When you constantly bring in nostalgia in a conversation that doesn't require nostalgia to be brought up in, or could just be personal opinion. In Draymond's case, I think he was speaking out of personal opinion, and me personally, I'm going to agree with Draymond, because that was a peak era. That was a peak era of basketball. That was a peak 4 or 5-ish years of basketball from 2015 to 2019. I think Draymond is right. But when you're constantly bringing in nostalgia into something like that, it's not necessary, and it honestly, again, it comes to a point where it just gets toxic. It just gets toxic, and it's not healthy for yourself, Stephen A. It's not healthy for yourself to constantly bring it up, because it paints a bad reputation for you. Because we, the media, we love to make we when we see something wrong, we go at it hard. I'll say it again. We, the media, when we see something wrong, we attack it. We go after it hard. We make jokes about it, memes about it. We never let this person live it down. We never let these analysts live down bad takes that they've made in the past. So I'm just saying, Stephen A., he's great. I love watching Stephen A. And again, I think he is the face of NBA media, and really just journalism, sports journalism in general, because he's like the biggest guy out there. Every sports show wants him on their show. He's a big voice, and he does great work. I am in no way, shape or form hating on Stephen A. But he is part of the problem, and he proved LeBron's point when he decided to go after LeBron on his hypocritical take, he is proving LeBron's point that this is the picture that we paint for the modern NBA era. And if the modern NBA era doesn't paint the exact same picture, if not make a better picture, we bash on the NBA. And, I got to come to the defense of the players here because it's uncalled for, it's not necessary, it's not fair, and it does get to a level of toxicity after a while. Now, in the defense of Stephen A., he did bring up other great points too, like the players are constantly complaining about how we the media are constantly going after them, and the players have gotten softer as of late. The players have gotten more fragile personalities as of late, and they got their own shows and all this. Because in today's generation, everybody has the opportunity to speak now. That social media is a big thing. Players have a chance to speak for themselves. They have opportunities to speak for themselves. Why do you think we got all these player hosted podcasts? Fred Warner's got a podcast. Micah Parsons got a podcast. Paul George has a podcast. Patrick Beverley has a podcast. Draymond has a podcast. Everybody has a podcast, and that allows them to be able to speak their minds freely. And I do think I will agree a little bit with Stephen A. Smith here that the players have gotten softer as of late. They don't really the players in today's game don't really take social media criticism as well as maybe the guys in the 90s did. But at the same time, the guys in the 80s and the 90s, social media was not as big. Social media was not as big in their era, so they didn't really hear a lot of the stuff that they would be hearing now if they played in today's era, because everybody's got an opportunity. Everybody has an outlet. Players can now speak their minds outside of the court, hence making their own podcasts and whatnot. And I think it's a great thing. Personally, I think it's a great thing that these players are making their podcasts, because not only can they speak their minds, it allows the players to be more than just NBA players. They can be human beings outside of the court, which is great. Conversation for another day. But my point is, I will agree with Stephen A. that I do think the league has gotten a little softer. I do think that these star players, they do complain a lot. Sometimes it's justified, sometimes it's not justified. So I will agree with Stephen A. on that much, that I do think the players have gotten a little softer, bigger egos. I do think that they do complain a lot more than they should. But, outside of that, again, the guys back in the 90s and the 80s, social media wasn't as big. Not everybody had an outlet. Not everybody had an opportunity to speak their mind. Today, everybody has it. Everybody can start their own podcast and talk about their experience in the NBA. Everybody can start their own podcast and talk about their experience with anything that they find interesting or that they can talk about. And I encourage it. I love watching the player-hosted podcasts because it allows us as fans, the media, it allows us to be able to dive a little bit into these guys' personal lives, and as well as what goes on behind the scenes with these organizations and in the locker room and whatnot, and the emotions after every game and whatnot. But those are the two biggest points of emphasis that I think that, and they're really the biggest reasons as to why I'm siding with the players here. I just think it gets to a level of toxicity. And if you don't see that, if you're a big-time NBA fan and you don't see that, which I highly doubt, because a lot of us, as NBA fans, we see this kind of toxicity. But if you're one of those guys that doesn't see it, or if you're an old head that is constantly living in the past still, I don't know what to tell you. It does get to a level of toxicity, constantly bringing up nostalgia and constantly trying to shove it down these young cats' face, when these young cats, they're just trying to have their own careers. They're not trying to be as good as Jordan. They're not trying to be as good as Kobe. Some of them are. Maybe some of them might be. Some of them might be trying to surpass those guys. And if they are, that's fine. But not everybody is trying to be the next Kobe. Not everyone is trying to be the next MJ. Not everybody is going to try to be the next LeBron, or Isaiah Thomas, or Tracy McGrady, or Larry Bird, or Magic. and you get where I'm going with this. Not every NBA player in today's game who's an all-star or not everybody is trying to surpass the old heads. If they do, that's cool. That's great. They're the new all-time great, and I'm all for it. But not everybody, not these young don't need to constantly get nostalgia shoved down their throats. They don't need us, the media, to constantly come out there and say, well, you better get that 6 ring standard that Jordan set, otherwise your career is XYZ. Nowhere near Jordan's, it's a bust. And I just think that's not right. It's not right, it's not fair. So I am gonna side with the players here. Again, I do think this was a topic that's kind of flown under the radar with all the NFL stuff that's coming out, with the draft coming up. The combine is, well, ends today, really. The offensive linemen are going today. They're testing out today. And, the Deebo trade. But I did think it was necessary to bring this up because I do think this was a controversial conversation that kind of flown under the radar again. It's kind of flown under the radar. And I just wanted to give my opinion on that because the face of the NBA, right now, there's really no clear-cut player who is the face of the NBA. Everybody has different opinions. Some people think it should be Jokic. Some people think it should be a homegrown product from the United States. Some people think it should be Ant because of all the big sports sponsorships that he has. So there's really no clear-cut player who is considered the new face of the league as of right now. Everybody's opinion is different. But I'm just going to say this. This has been Season 2, Episode 8 of the Life's Playbook podcast. Again, if you haven't heard already, I don't know where my co-host is. He decided to no-show today. If he has a good reason, I'll hear him out. Again, he is in the military, so duty does call. And if it is a military-related reason, it's understandable. I'm not going to bash on him just yet. But today was just me, and I'll catch you guys possibly Tuesday. Possibly Tuesday for Season 2, Episode 9 of the show. But I will definitely catch you guys Thursday. Like and subscribe under this video. It is greatly appreciated. You guys are helping me and helping the channel get out there and grow. I appreciate it. Thank you guys. And let me know in the comments too what you think about, the Deebo Samuels trade and the Ayuk rumors that he's going to be traded next. And let me know especially what you guys think about, the controversial face of the NBA conversation and what you guys think about Stephen A. and LeBron and Anthony Edwards and where you guys stand. With that being said, peace out.